Thank you for watching Fireside. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider liking and subscribing to be notified when future episodes release. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fireside. With me today is a newer voice within the OSRS content creation space, someone who has become known for his statistical analyses of RuneScape's most obtuse and frustrating element, the drop rates. Alongside this, he has since started his own Snowflake series as well, which is going strong and surely even more happening down the pipeline for him too. So with us today is Gamecube Jona. Welcome to Fireside.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to talk to you, man.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. It's been, I've been going through a lot of like the quote unquote, OG content creators recently. So it's awesome to have someone who's kind of like me, a bit newer in this space, maybe less experienced, so more of a kindred spirit, I guess you could say.
Us rookies are gonna take over, man. Mark my words.
Yeah, we're the third or fourth generation, Like I think I pitched this idea to Soup where I'm like the generations of content creators, where it's like the OGs, Soup, Framed, and then we have like the Bodhi, the people that came after, like Settled, that really innovated the Snowflake space, and then after that we had like this third generation, like Josh's in gaming,
hmm
Telecon, people unguided, and now we kind of are seeing some of these fourth generation content creators, which are further nichifying the space. Does that make any sense?
It makes total sense. You notice it already. Like you're also in the creator Discord, and there's you see these groups of people that sort of are very tight knit together. And I think it's very much to do with when they started content creation. So like for example, like I don't know if you know Dogi.
Yeah, of course.
Um, like he and I also like talk a bit, and we started at like a month from each other or something. So there's a lot of logic to what you're saying.
For sure. How's it felt now that you kind of have two outlets for OSRS specific content, right? You have your Snowflake series, you have your more stats driven series. How's it feeling? Like how are you feeling about your channel?
Oh, well, as you were saying this, I'm in the longest upload drought of my channel,
Hmm.
in its entire history. So I've somehow maintained a upload schedule of one upload every 2 weeks since my channel's inception. And then and then leaks came, which I've been meaning to make a video about, but I lost all my day one recording, which is unfortunate because
That
that's
does suck.
90% of leaks is day one.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I mean, just reached 10K subscribers last week.
Hey, there you
Like
go.
super happy about that. And yeah, I do have some really cool stuff in the pipeline.
There we go. No, I mean, congratulations, first of all. Yeah, the leagues is very interesting.
Thank you.
I've been very like I have a script where I kind of tangentially talk about leagues and game modes and stuff in OSRS. But I've always been very like cautious about making content about them just because it's like such a flitting thing, like it feels like everyone makes a leagues video and then no one ever makes another leagues video after, or like their leagues videos after just get like a quarter of the attention because either everyone's playing leagues or it's just such a short-lived thing that no one's really talking about it after like a week or two.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and it's something very sunny. Like I don't know if you see this as well in your like YouTube statistics. But, like, the day that leagues started, I could see a noticeable dip in views across all my videos. It's so funny to see. And then it's now slowly starting to crawl back up as people are finishing up with their league experience and moving back to regular videos. But it was a funny analytics thing that caught my eye.
Yeah, I'm sure it definitely has happened as well for me, especially for my OSRS specific videos. Obviously, I have my like difficulty video that did pretty well, so that one kind of held strong surprisingly through leagues. Maybe people
Yeah,
were
of
using it
course.
as a
Great video, by the
second
way.
monitor. Thank you. The people using it as second monitor content while like I don't know grinding Hunter or whatever people were doing in leagues. But well, actually, well, before we even get into the real topics, how'd you feel about leagues now that you're kind of really engaged in it?
I really liked it. I I am not very good at this game, but I'm good enough that I could manage to get through like the echo bosses, and then once you get to the water thorns built, e- everything becomes AFK, which I think to me is always a lot of fun. Every leagues I should try and do some new content to make myself a little bit of a better player. So I try to do some awakened bosses, for example, or send a couple more Infernal, a couple more Colosseums. And I did all that. I have the feeling I became a better gamer during this league. I loved the demonic pact system. It's such a clever way to improve upon the combat masteries, I think. And I like there's of course there's gonna be some metas that develop like the Water Forms build I just mentioned, but it was, for a first attempt at such a skill tree, I think they knocked it out of the park, really.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you're saying here. I felt the same way. It's exactly what I wanted the follow up to the previous league, which was my first league that I've played, to look like. So I think it was a very interesting experience to see them kind of like dip their toes into something a lot grander, a lot more complicated, and see how they handled it. So criticisms aside, I think they overall did a great job on it, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. I think. How do you? Well, first of all, how long have you been playing OSRS for, or just RuneScape in general?
Oof, well, just RuneScape, I don't actually remember. My parents claim it was since I was, like, 5 or 6 years old, which is 23 years ago. Um But I don't remember my actual start. My dad does remember that he had to come to the PC to help translate some stuff for me because, well, I'm not a native English speaker. Um, so and he recalls that every time he came up and he had to translate, like, these entire sentences because I wanted to do, like, The Restless Ghost or something. And, the more time went on, so this is when I'm turning 7 or 8, he had to come less and less, and sometimes it was just a word, and after that, I didn't need him anymore, and so, at age 9 or something, I basically fully self-taught myself, English through this beautiful game. But yeah, so I've been playing since I was a very small kid, probably up until I was, like, 12-ish, uh, got hacked, classic, and then came back for OSRS couple of years after release, not immediately.
I feel like learning English through RuneScape or learning how to type through RuneScape is a common meme within the community, so it definitely makes sense. I'm also ESL myself, so I not through RuneScape, but can definitely relate learning English through different kinds of games that I was playing growing up. So I definitely feel some level of kindred spirit there as well. Um, so
I'm so grateful. It's
yeah, no, I can imagine. I can imagine. It's a really nice way to learn English too, because it's very much like it's not like a traditional method. So it doesn't even feel like you're learning a language or like you're doing homework. It feels like you're just playing a game, which you are. And then by nature of doing that, like I think one of my first times ever playing WoW was before I even properly started playing WoW was when I was a kid. I was over at my friend's place in Spain, of all places. I'm not from Spain, but I was in Spain at that point, and he had WoW downloaded on his computer, and it was all in Spanish. And I would
Oh, wow, yeah.
learn certain words in Spanish just by proxy of watching him play the game. So that's uh, yeah. So I can definitely relate to that. When it comes to RuneScape content creation, like what spurred you on to create it? I know that you kind of mentioned it in your most recent video about like your 1 year anniversary becoming a RuneScape content creator, but like I'd love to hear your thoughts on like what spurred you on to do it. What have been your like learning experiences? What have been your biggest problems, your biggest successes, and so on?
Yeah, sure. So, my I had this idea for this Snowflake account, this 50/50 series that I have. For a fairly long time, I always thought it was an interesting concept, for an account, and I think I have the main account I play is my group Iron Man that I have with 4 friends, and I was just feeling a little burnt out on that account, and then we all went to RuneFest. I had this idea already in the back of my mind, but then meeting all these creators was so inspiring and motivating, and indeed, I mentioned it in the video as well, but the thing that really pushed me across the line was meeting Jimmy, and Jimmy, basically having a short conversation with him and him saying like, "Hey, just why don't you just go for it?" And I think 1 week later or 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after RuneFest, I uploaded my very first video, and like I said, after that, I kept a fairly tight upload schedule of 1 video every 2 weeks, up until Leagues released.
I think that's great, honestly. And I've similarly to you also have been trying to stick to a schedule like that. Like, every I think 2 to 3 weeks has been my general cadence for as long as I can think. There's been some gaps here and there. Like, funnily enough, leagues was also a gap for me. Not this one actually, it was the RS3 one, which was my first real like time jumping into that. And I really wanted to
How
make
was
a
ours
video.
free leaks? I'm curious.
I mean, I think the general takeaway, if I'm speaking for the community that I am definitely not a part of, is that it was interesting but flawed as a first take on leagues kind of has to be. There were many issues with it, but I had a really fun time overall because I was kind of learning the game, figuring out how things work, and just like really delving deep into systems that just don't exist in OSRS. And also, it's worth noting that I have no real severe biases against RuneScape 3 as a game because I wasn't like, spurned by the idea of EOC as it
By
existed
the
in 20.
EOC drama, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like I have no like negative feelings towards the game. So I hopped in with a very like open-minded mentality, and I saw a lot of positives about the game. I saw a lot of things that I really liked about the game, some things that I think the game does better than OSRS. And then I also saw a whole bunch of negatives as well. Negatives that, based on their like year long cadence, something they're calling the road to restoration, that they're really looking to kind of alleviate or outright fix. Which is making me very excited to hop into the game proper at some point during this year. Like that's been my, not to yap too long, but that's been my
Yeah.
like go to right now is I'm trying to max in OSRS, obviously make a video about that. And then I really want to hop into, as a group Iron Man, hop into RuneScape 3 and just kind of see what it's like and potentially make a video or two about that, comparing it to the game, just saying my thoughts and feelings about it and all that. So that's been my year long journey right now as well.
That's fun, man. The group Iron Man that I play with on old school, the five guy team, we're actually planning to start an RS3 Iron Man, group Iron Man for this exact same reason. Like we saw the road to restoration, the getting rid of all the daily escape, and we figured the game deserves another proper shot. Now I don't necessarily think I'll create content around it, but it's definitely something I'm looking forward to trying with the boys.
Yeah, I think that the content element of it is definitely difficult because it's just a less popular game. There's just not going to be as much like growth potential there. For me, I think that what's interesting about RS3 content, and I pointed this out to my group Iron Man friend as well, where videos like summarizing an experience of the game do really well, but like actual game specific content is obviously much more niche because of how much smaller the game is compared to OSRS. Where like you can look at like Josh Strife Hayes' video on RuneScape 3. That video was insane. Like that video outperformed most of his channel content, and he's like a million channel content creator. He's a huge content creator in the MMO space and just the general gaming space. And his RuneScape 3 video performed like 3x his usual videos, which is like crazy to think about just comparatively to how small the game is by OS or even OSRS standards, right?
No, indeed, but I think RS3 and also old school hit that sort of not everyone has played it, but sort of everyone, at least in the MMO space, knows about it. So if you see a video on RuneScape, I think MMO players are more inclined to click it, even if they haven't ever played it. So that I think that would explain why it does relatively well.
Yeah, that's been my like motivation too, because like generally speaking, the way I've been uploading videos is that like I do like a more of a general video, of course more general MMO video, and then I do like a old school RuneScape video. And obviously I would say the majority of the people watching my content are old school RuneScape players, so my old school RuneScape videos tend to outperform for the most part. But I do really want to make sure that I'm keeping an open mind and making sure I'm making general content as well, just because frankly, like, and this is a whole different subject, so we don't have to dwell on it too long. But like, the reality is that I don't make serialized content in this space, so my
Right?
content is almost always it's finite, right? Like if you're making a Chunk Man series or any kind of Snowflake series, they are designed to be about as infinite as you can be in content creation. Where you look at like a Chunk Man, they're just gonna keep going. There's no reason really not to unless the views fall off, right? Um, and other serialized content works the same way. But if you're not making serialized content, if you're making video essays, there's only a finite number of topics to really talk about, right?
No, indeed, but like, so your video essays, because in my mind, you don't necessarily make old school specific video essays. You make MMO like broader video essays. So mostly because you're comparing WoW to old school, um, some of the time. So like I kind of already see you as more broad in the MMO space, much like an idol, for example. Um, but would you like to branch out even further beyond that? Do you think, or
I think I speak for every essayist, I guess, if I can call myself that, channel on YouTube. When I say yes, I want to branch out as much as I possibly can. Not because I don't like what I do, but because it allows me to just talk about stuff I really care about at any given moment, right? Like, generally, I would say, if I had to
fair
just
enough?
assume, most people that make video essays on YouTube or wherever else, frankly, are probably people with like a eclectic number of interests that they want to talk about. But obviously, they feel pigeonholed by an audience, and that's not the audience's fault by no means. But it's mostly just like a byproduct of the way YouTube creates the algorithm, the way you nicheify your channel in some ways. And I have so many things I'm interested in, right? Like, the dream would be general game essays. That would be awesome if I could just make a video about a game that I like and have that video get traction and start a conversation. Like, that's always been my goal with my channel, is just to start conversations about whatever I'm speaking about. Um and while, for as much as I think old school RuneScape is a super interesting game, and it's the most interesting MMO out right now, and I have the most to say about it, and it's my favorite one out right now too. There's only so much I can really say without just retreading the same topics over and over again, or just becoming like a news channel. Like, I can go and give my thoughts on something,
Yeah, that makes sense.
which is fine, but it's just not something that I'm like super passionate about. So yeah, eventually I'd love to do that. Unfortunately, also MMOs are just, they're not the hottest genre, in not even in a viewership standpoint. I think from a viewership standpoint they do really well. It's like in a interesting topic standpoint, because there's just not a lot happening in the genre right now.
Just give it some time. Like we basically got Classic Plus sort of somewhat announced on the way, right? I
Yeah.
think so. I'm really excited to try that. I'm not really a WoW player. I've never gotten a character to level 60, but I'm still excited to try it out. But I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's I think for most creators, even for me, who's like purely old school RuneScape focused, like I don't know if I'll be playing this game forever. I do really like making videos. I like making specifically the maps videos. So I'd be interested in seeing how I can branch that out a little outside of old school as well. But I don't think it's happening on this particular channel, right? I think GameCube Jonah will forever be a RuneScape channel, and I'm fine with that.
It's weird. It kind of depends. So I spoke with shout out to the RS guy, who's prolific RS3 content creator, and he has a lot of like contacts at YouTube who, he spent a lot of time speaking with and like learning how the algorithm works and all that kind of stuff. And based on what he said to me, like, I don't want to obviously expose private conversations, but based on what he said to me, the algorithm is pretty interesting in that it doesn't explicitly nicheify your channel. YouTube just kind of pitches your channel and your video, your specific new video, to different audiences. So like, over the course of a couple days or 3 days, 4 days, where generally like the first day is them pitching your video to your core viewer base, like the people that almost always will click a GameCube Jonah video. The second day is a more of like a wider net. It's casting to like inconsistent viewers that maybe watched one or two of your videos. And then on day three, it's testing your video across like way broader demographics, like trying to find a completely different audience for your video. So if GameCube Jonah makes a Skyrim video talking about the statistics of, getting sat on by a dragon or whatever the fuck, like, you could, if you make a video like that, the first 2 days are probably going to be pretty nothing. Like, most of your viewers might not click on that video, and maybe you'll get like a couple hundred views at most. But then your third day, it will go like, if it latches on to a completely different demographic of viewers. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but if you notice, something interesting is that if you look at like big pop-off video essays from different channels, whether they be big ones or small ones, the pop-off day is almost always day three, because it's testing different audiences. And it just happens to find an audience that is that is very amicable to the video topic.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Um, well, you might have inspired me. The mathematics, the odds of a dragon sitting on your head in Skyrim sounds like a banger video, actually.
Yeah, and listen, like then based on this information, if it is true and if it all checks out, which I think it is, like I have no reason to doubt it, is that you can't really tank your channel when it comes to just like making content. Where like generally speaking, it's recommended like if you're a gaming channel, you stick to gaming, but it's pretty open ended with what kind of gaming you can include on your channel. And similarly to that, you can also like try out a video. It might not do well at all, but your next video won't be really impacted if it just hits your niche audience anyway, right? Like if you make a video that gets 100 views, and your next video is just like another OSRS video that gets like 30K views, it's fine. Your channel's not going to be like ruined because of that one video. The only thing that's gonna be impacted by a negatively performing video, is probably sponsorship opportunities. You know,
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm sure the audience is like, why are they talking about YouTube content creation? Listen, I think
This
that
happens every time. Every time you're talking with another content creator, it just ends up going down this rabbit hole, even though you have a whole list of other topics.
yeah, yeah. So in that case, let's just we kind of touched on your motivations, your future goals for content creation. And I think obviously you would also want to branch out at some point. I think that genuinely that applies to most, like 95% of content creators in whatever space they exist. They probably wish they can do more than what they're doing, just because that's the nature of just being a person that makes, YouTube videos or just creative content in general. I've never spoken to Jimmy, but I'm sure Jimmy's the same way. I'm sure everybody is. So it's nothing crazy there. When it comes to like creating a Snowflake account, which is kind of what you're doing alongside your statistics videos as well, what prompted how do you come up with an idea there? Like what really put you on the 50-50 space? Or like can you maybe you could just explain what your idea was to the audience listening too?
Yeah, okay. So indeed, for those who are not familiar with my 50-50 series, basically I created an account that is an Iron Man, that is only allowed to kill each mob in the game, until he has a 50% chance at that mob's rarest drop. So let's say the rarest drop that you can get from a goblin is a grimy dwarf weed at a rate of, I think, is like 1 in 500 something. That would mean that I'm only allowed to kill, let's say, 300 goblins, because that will give me a 50% chance at getting that grimy dwarf weed. That is the basis of the account. How did I get to that idea? I don't remember. It's been in my head for so long. I think I was just binging a lot of other Snowflake accounts, and I figured, what is something that could be fun, but that is not as tedious and grindy as a one chunk man, or as hellish and something you need so much skill for, like nightmare mode. And this was just it fit me very well. I didn't even think of the mathematics before I started the series. For me, it felt very natural. And then when I started the account, I was like, what is a good way to showcase this restriction? And in the very first episode, I did Imp Catcher. And Imp Catchers, funnily enough, immediately an introduction to this mathematical concept of the coupon collector problem, which I won't go into the maths here, because then it will be an extremely boring podcast for some of the viewers. If you would like more information, you can find it on my channel. But that's when I already noticed, like, hey, this mathematics in RuneScape is actually something that I love talking about. So both ideas were sort of born outside of the same concept.
Cool. No, it definitely checks out. I think that the the math element of those videos and just the holistically math statistically stats oriented elements of your those videos that are all about that, I think they really tap into kind of a implicit kind of enjoyment that RuneScape fans have, right? Like I think these videos, by the way, would do well outside of RuneScape, but they specifically tap so well into the RuneScape headspace because RuneScape is so driven by numbers, right? Like because it's driven by optimizations, by like crazy emergent tech. these are all things that are driven by a level of consideration for stats, mathematics, probability, things like that, right? And the whole game, frankly, is driven by RNG, right? Not just in the drop rates, but like in just accuracy. Like, I don't know if you've done a video about this, but I've seen most of your videos, so I feel like I would remember it, like a video on just hit chance would be interesting. Like the scalability of that. What's the sweet spot? Like, and I think also on topic of hit chance, which is a whole different skew of RNG and probability within RuneScape, there's also this interesting like psychological element to it where there's like a sweet spot for hit chance where it stops being obnoxious and frustrating and inaccurate and starts feeling normal, like fine, not a problem, and it's not 100%. And finding that sweet spot, I know that's a maybe not necessarily super related to stats, is also just an interesting concept psychologically. It's something that Mod Rice and I talked about, not on the podcast, but privately, about that concept of like
Right.
a sweet spot of RNG.
It's funny because, like, my videos are, of course, very statistics based, but I'd like to include more of the because what makes statistics interesting to the average player, is the psychology. Because if every person perfectly understood statistics the way it's laid out in front of them, then the videos wouldn't be interesting. It's because we experience something else psychologically when we're playing the game, like, we should have gotten a drop already, or when we get devout boots, we say, "Well, that could have been the ranger boots." That makes that video so interesting, I think.
Yep, 100%. Like, and so obviously a lot of your stats stuff is very driven by drop rates, and that's like the skew you have right now. But have you considered touching on other RNG elements of RuneScape as well?
Not necessarily other RNG elements. What you just said about like, the accuracy and how combat rolls work, and stuff like that. Um, it's something people have asked before, whether I wanna do a deep dive on it, and the answer is yes, I would like to. I just haven't found the forum yet. But it's definitely something I want to make because I think, like, every time I start drafting up these videos, I ask myself the question, "Would I want to watch this video?" Like, would I click on this video, as a RuneScape player? And when it comes to, how is accuracy actually calculated and how is hit chance actually calculated, I would click on that in a heartbeat. I just don't know how to format it exactly yet.
Yep, 100%. That no, that makes complete sense to me. I think that I mean, I don't know how you'd want to approach that topic, but it's definitely a super interesting one. And I feel like with a good title, a good thumbnail, there is no doubt in my mind that it would be a clickable thing. Like something about how, your brain plays tricks on you based on the accuracy you have in a mob. Maybe maybe even it's just something simple, like the idea that if your accuracy is over 90%, like the scalability of like you should never be focusing on getting more accuracy after that at a certain point, right? Like the scalability of that accuracy is like proportionally so much lower. Like the difference between 90 and 92% is not only does it feel less, but like the actual stats themselves are being scaled down, right? Like you're getting a lot less accuracy from a plus 70 like stab boost, but if you already have a 90% accuracy on your stab attacks, like that would be like that's like my understanding of the way this is the back end of OSRS stat scaling works. And I feel like that's something that the general player base might not understand about the game. Like I could see them being like, oh, I'm pretty accurate here, but more accuracy can't hurt. But sometimes more accuracy does hurt unless if you can actually get strength bonus instead, for example.
I actually think most RuneScape players probably don't pay any attention to accuracy at all. I think they think, Rune is better than Adamant, is better than Steel, and that is about the extent of, it's just better weapon means I equip it and use it everywhere. Now, by average RuneScape player, I probably don't mean the people that are, listening to this podcast because they're probably a little above average. So they might be interested in some accuracy and hit chance videos. But yeah, there's a lot of things to it actually. It's something I've been toying around with, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. Is a lot of, the DPS and time to kill at bosses is people use the DPS calc for everything, right? And base everything around that. But there's also just an element of pure, skill level and not missing any attack ticks and that type of stuff. So I've been toying around with the idea of doing a broader data science project where you can compare uh, boss time to kills for players of different skill levels and see how skill level also impacts your time to kill. So there's multiple axes where you can walk on. You can see like, oh, if I use a shadow instead of a mystic fire staff, I don't know, my time to kill on average goes down by 20 seconds. But if I'm a grandmaster in combat achievements, my time kill goes down by 30 seconds when using the exact same gear. I think concepts like that can be very interesting. Um, I just don't know exactly how to achieve that yet, but I'm building a plugin that might help.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea because and it's something I've always thought a lot about, or at least I say always. When I started understanding the way the game works better, it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. I think that I would say that the biggest optimization, like a new player who wants to get better at the game can do, is stop losing as many ticks. Like watching some of my friends who just started playing the game, like again, maybe a couple months ago, 6, 7, 8 months ago, and watching them get into things like CG for the first time and feeling so overwhelmed by that. And I always tell them, I'm like, listen, the reason these kills feel so long, the reason you feel like you're not doing much to the boss before you die is because you're spending too much time spam clicking and too little time actually prioritizing the boss. Always be hitting. ABH. That's the phrase I say, right? Like you want to be hitting when you are brewing. You want to be hitting when you're drinking. You want to be obviously you can't hit sometimes when you have the attack delay, but like literally you'd be surprised by how much damage you can have, how much more damage you could get from whatever you're doing if you're not just doing one thing simultaneously. And with that in mind, that's what creates a lot of difficulty with playing around certain kinds of weapons. It's something that I think Sebe and I talked about, where like his idea that a weapon like a blowpipe is the hardest weapon in the entire game to use, like objectively the hardest, because
Right.
it's a two-tick weapon. So statistically, you are going to lose more time on that weapon on like an intense boss fight where you have to move because or at least you statistically have to optimize more because you have to make sure you're getting a hit every 2 ticks. While weapons like mega rares, which are all 5 ticks, are much, much, much easier to use. And it's actually something that I myself have been kind of like not necessarily critical of, but wanting to see Jagex more I guess, experimental with is creating more high skill cap weapons. And one of those methods of doing that is through shortening attack times or creating different kinds of attack cycles that players can orient themselves around. Why aren't there weapons that have a multi-hit combos that one hits has a 2 tick delay, other one has 4, other one has 5? You know, like things like that that just create more consideration and optimizations and make you just perceive fights differently. That's always been my favorite part of some of the itemization in old school. Sorry for the yap, but yeah, I agree that that's a really cool idea, and I'd love to see more on that.
Yeah, I think so. I love the idea, by the way, of dynamic attack rates. I think that's such an unexplored concept in OSRS, and I think it's a really interesting one. But the thing that sprouted this idea about like data collection of people doing bosses uh, is I in my statistics videos I have to make assumptions on time to kill for bosses, and people have a wildly different idea of what a reasonable time to kill is for a Yama or for a Delve 1 through 8 of Doom or for Tombs of a Masked. And so I always get comments like, "What you're estimating for these time to kill is completely unreasonable." So what I really wanna do is I wanna get this plugin out there, and that will sort of crowdsource all the time to kill information from everyone who has this plugin installed, and then you will see that it probably shows like a normal distribution around a certain kill time, and then I can use that kill time in my videos and say, to my community, like, this is this is your true mean or median of kill time that we can use for the basis of this video, because I think it's probably right now my weakest point is the kill time assumptions. So I need
Yeah,
to have it more
that would be an
grounded.
awesome plugin. Honestly, I would definitely download that. I would just if that plugin can also not only crowdsource data but aggregate your own data for kill times and stuff. That would be really
It
really
it it,
cool.
w- it will be able to. It will be
Yeah,
able to. Yep.
I would love that. That would be really really cool. It's cool. That's the kind of stats like stuff that I think just people that are interested in PVM and improving in the game would be super fascinated by. Because I was talking to one of my friends, months ago at this point, where he bought an Eye of Iac, and he's like, "Man, my whisper kill times really haven't improved." And I'm like, "Yo, just send me one of those kills, and I will tell you exactly what you're doing wrong." I already know what he was doing wrong because he was using a trident before that. And I saw the clip, and it's like, yeah, you're moving like you still have a trident, so your max hits lower, and you're just still only hitting once every 4 to 5 ticks. So you're just not
Yeah.
utilizing the actual benefits of having an eye, which is a 3 tick charge staff for people listening. So yeah, it's like a very it's a very interesting thing. Like those kinds of optimizations are incredibly interesting, and that's why I've always begged the Jagex for future weapons to experiment with stuff like that. Like I don't want the next mega rare, whatever it's gonna be, to just be another big hitting 5 tick weapon. Because to me, not only mega rares are a whole different topic, like fucking we don't have to touch on that, but not only is it just going to be one of the easiest weapons in the entire game to use, but it's also one of the easiest weapons in the entire game to use that blockades the entire rest of the end game progression through and pigeonholes it into a single binary choice of what it's good against. I know I'm not going to start ranting about mega rares, but that's always been my perspective. Like I want Jagex to play around with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I do trust Jagex in their design. I think whatever they're gonna come up with upcoming content, it'll be better than previous content. Somehow Jagex keeps impressing, at least to me.
What kind of player are you generally speaking? Like, are you more of a PVM player, more skilling driven? Like, what's your favorite aspect of old school? I guess.
I'm a jack of all trades, but a very mediocre one, if that makes sense. So on a regular account, so on a non-leagues account, I have never completed the Inferno. I have never completed the Colosseum, and I've never done Doom. Uh, so part of the reason I started the 50/50 series is also to get a little bit more comfortable with PVM. Uh, I know a decent bit. Like I'm fairly I can do Corrupted Gauntlet without dying, you know, uh, ev- basically every time. I basically don't die anymore in Corrupted Gauntlet. I'm very comfortable with that kind of PVM. But when it comes to like the truly hard stuff like Inferno and Colosseum, I just haven't dived in and taught myself it yet. And 50/50 is one of the ways to push myself to actually start learning the difficult content because I do love PVM. But in general, I love everything about this game. I love the social aspect. I love XP wasting and standing at the bank and talking to random people. I love skilling. It's there's for every mood there is a RuneScape activity.
Certainly, I definitely agree with that. I think, yeah, I know, I mean, yeah, you couldn't have put it better myself. I couldn't have put it better myself. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades myself. Of course, recently I've been really trying to max my account, which has been its own separate
How close
hurdle.
are you?
So right now I am the skills I have left are prayer, which I'm 91, but I have like a million bone shards banked right now, so that's it's almost done there.
That's just waiting for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's gonna probably take like it's probably gonna take a solid 10 hours to get through them, which is not exciting, but yeah, it's almost there. I have crafting, but I'm 200k away, and I already have it banked. It's just gonna be my last skill I max, just to whatever. It'll be the
Yep.
easiest one to
Yep.
max finally. I have agility, which is 92 right now, which is that's the real block for me right now, the mental block for me, where I'm like, I hate everything about agility. And while I think Hollowed Sepulchre is like really well designed content, the way it scales and the way you have to do it for such a shitty reward makes me like kind of dread doing it. And then other than that, I just have Hunter, which is one of my least favorite skills as well. I know I shouldn't have kept all my least favorite skills to last, but yeah, it's one of my least favorite skills as well. And there's obviously nothing to AFK at Hunter. You just have to kind of do it. At least the XP rates are fine. And then finally smithing, and then I'm done, which is 90.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So not too far left. All of my skills are above 90. And I have just about everything banked to max them as well. So essentially, I am just the only thing limiting me right now is my own patience and my own frustration over agility. Frankly,
Yeah, I get that. I personally, I think Hello the Sepulcher is great content. But I've never played it on a non-Ironman, so I always like chasing the Ring of Endurance, even though it's not very good. I just I do everything for the collection log pop-up.
yeah, no, I get that. And yeah, obviously this is on my Iron Man 2, so that's partly why I'm like gonna push myself to do Hollow Sepulchre. Where initially I wanted to get 92 via rooftops, which is what I did. That's how I got 92 agility. And then after that, I was
Right.
like, okay, now I'm gonna send Hollow Sepulchre and just send it until I get my Ring of Endurance. And then when I get my ring, I'll be able to, and that's gonna like motivate me to get my Hunter up too, because I'll charge up the ring and make Hunter a little bit less cringe. So that'll be like my kind of psychological gratification of doing two things, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah. It's very
S-
important to have those psychological goals
Yeah,
for
exactly. And
intermediate.
it's setting your own goals. You can't name something more RuneScape than that.
Exactly.
When it comes to like your own like, so we talked about a little bit about your goals with your content creation. We talked a little bit about like your general perspectives on the game, the way you play it and stuff. Do you have like a explicit goal for the game right now, or are you just excited to see what's down the pipeline for updates and stuff?
So the only account I really play is Mike Penny, which is the account for the 50/50 series. And that account has a very clear goal of getting the master level of combat achievements, which it is going to make me a better PVMer in the long run. And currently, I'm working towards 69 Slayer for Monkey Madness, so I can do demonics and then tormented, and hopefully get a Demon Bane weapon for the series. That would be that would make my life so much easier at so many other bosses. Uh, but only 50% chance. So, let's hope I get lucky there. But
Yeah, exactly.
those are my main goals is just working towards those master combat achievements. And currently, it's not skill locked yet, but at some point, I'm gonna run into a wall where I'm gonna have to do things I've never done before, like Yama or Doom,
Hell
which is
yeah.
gonna be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big enjoyer of those two fights. I'm generally just an enjoyer of a lot of like modern encounter design for old school. That's always been something that I've been very positive about, and Doom is just my favorite boss in the entire game. So, have you like dabbled with Doom in leagues? I'm assuming you've touched on leagues Doom kind of vibe.
I've touched it in leagues. The only issues in leagues, it was well, one, we didn't have like any actual proper Demon Bane weapons except for the infernal
Dark
boppers.
Puddle, yeah.
And then let's see, there was also a bug with Doom because I went mage. And you had you have the stone things that come up when you have the shield that moves from like the one stone to the other.
Hmm.
And it was double hitting these
Yeah,
things. So it would pop up and instantly disappear, and then you would just get smacked, which was not a very fun experience.
yeah.
So
I went.
I've dabbled with Doom. I've made it to Delve 8, and I've completed Delve 8 um, with some water spell help. But it was not the most fun experience I've had. But I can definitely see how once you're familiar with the fight and once it clicks, you're just gonna like most of like a couple of my friends that are like grandmasters in the game, they've said that Doom is their favorite fight in the entire game.
Definitely. I think that in leagues, yeah, there were that bug is really frustrating. I was lucky; I was using a blind bag build for Doom in leagues, so I was killing him before I even saw those dust, whatever people call that mechanic. Goddamn. The yeah the Leviathan lure mechanic, I guess you could say.
Yeah, yeah.
That I was just killing him before that because during his car phase, I would just follow him with melee and just nuke him down before he went into the dust phase, which happens after the car phase. So I was very fortunate there, but that obviously saw me take a lot of unavoidable damage. So I think the max I could push to was like 16 or 20 deep delve, and after that I was just out of resources. And because I was killing them so fast, I also didn't have the opportunity to clear the arena of the poison. So it was just this really weird thing
Right.
where I would just, the whole arena would just be covered and I wouldn't have any resources left because I would just be tanking a lot of his hits when it comes to like his smashes during the car phase. But it was a fun experience. I think in game, like in the main game, obviously you have to actually interface with the mechanics fully. And it's funny because Doom is a great example of what we were talking about earlier with like using weapon speeds to your advantage, because during the car phase your accuracy against them is 100%. So there's this tech where you would use a blowpipe against them because it's 100% accurate, so you would just be able to
Right.
completely shred them. But a lot of people, I think, weren't benefiting from that idea because they would be running around too much and not actually using the 2 tick speed of the blowpipe to out DPS the Scobo. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there that who knows, maybe that's what's going to inspire you to really delve into that kind of speed related conversation, or tick related conversation.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I am looking forward to becoming a better RuneScape player. I feel like at some point, once you start creating content around it, it's something I said to Jimmy. I thought it was inspiring that he managed to make such good content while being not a great RuneScape player, which he luckily didn't take any offense to. Um, but like because I'm basically the same way in skill. I think I'm probably the same skill level as Jimmy is in this game, which is still above the average old school RuneScape player. But it's as a content creator, I see it as training for a potential future participation in the Gillinor games. Uh, if we can dream big for a second, if I
Yeah.
ever get my name called for the Gillinor games, I wanna be ready, and I wanna be able to tackle every boss in the game, um, with reasonable skill.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm excited for the next season to see what newbies they bring on from this content creation space too. I think yeah, it's a great point, and I always appreciated that. I think that some people are I think I said this to Framed actually, where like some people are very critical towards Jimmy because they perceive like, oh, he doesn't play the game, like what the fuck, like. But the reality is that I think Jimmy speaks to a demographic of players, and for a demographic of players that otherwise don't have a really big voice within the content creation space, right? Like you have your Snowflake accounts, you have your, crazy top end players like No Monkey that make content about the game, but you really don't have like a normal player that might actually see value in like a house party, or like just doing something fun instead of doing something optimal.
Yeah.
And I think that is a it's an not only is it a kind of an untapped market, but it requires a level of like perspective that some of the more top end players might not have, or just players that are very nicheified might not have that perspective.
Yeah, I feel like I appreciate part of the fact that MMOs, like, the skill level just keeps increasing and so fast, and you have people like Port Kazar that are out there doing stuff that nobody's ever heard of. But I I've always felt the way like a video game should still stay a video game, especially an MMO. It should be a social experience in its core. And I know a lot of people like to play RuneScape as if it's a single player game, but I've always drifted to games that my friends are playing as well, which is why I have the 5 man group Iron Man as well. It's I really need that social aspect of any game I'm playing. Which is partly why I do love Jimmy's videos and like the Gary Gilbert stuff and the house parties. I think that's all just fantastic, fantastic stuff. It really showcases the how funny some people in this community really are.
Yeah, I think I'm very grateful. I'm part of my group Iron Man as well. I genuinely, and I think I've said this before, I don't know if I would have stuck with the game as hard as I have if it weren't for the group Iron Man game mode. I think it's the perfect blend of like the satisfaction of Iron Man without like the loneliness that Iron Man brings with it sometimes. It's really is
For
such a
sure.
one it's such a wonderful game mode. Like the idea that you can go with your friend, like I can go with my group Iron Man partner and do TOA, and it feels like we're just doubling up instead of sacrificing potential for like loot and all that kind of stuff is awesome. Like being able to do Cox with him, like even if it was 3 man instead of 2 man chambers as Eric, like the idea that we're essentially like double dipping on loot potential because we're a group Iron Man partner is so satisfying. I love that so much. And it creates so many memorable moments where one of us gets something, the other one doesn't, and we can share loot. We can build like we can itemize around what we have together, which is really cool and creates a whole new layer of consideration. And I really think that also has kept me interested in RuneScape's endgame, which is a branch of the game which I'm probably most critical of old school RuneScape in its endgame, specifically in its itemization in the endgame. But that's maybe a different topic. But I think the fact that I'm in a group Ironman has really allowed me to still remain passionate for the itemization because I'm still itemizing around what both he and I have.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Mm. What do you I guess like obviously we both like old school RuneScape a lot, but I'm curious like what are some elements of old school that you kind of want to see touched on? Like even just from your own perspective as a Snowflake account, as a stats driven content creator and just as a player, what are some things that you want to see Jagex touch up on in the upcoming year?
Oh, you mean in like a summer sweep up kind of style, or?
Both. Let's talk like mechanical changes that they can do in summer sweep up and just like systemic changes they might do at a different time.
Wow, God, I think at this point I'm not going to pretend like I know better than the developers do here. I've been enjoying the wave of content that they've been sending our way. Well, okay, maybe not so much this year. We've kind of had a drought, main game content wise, but I've really enjoyed sailing, for example, which I think I'm kind of an exception there. But I feel like I trust the developers in saying like, "Hey, whatever they're gonna come up with, I think Blood Moon Rises is gonna be very cool." I'm really looking forward to Raids 4 and see what they can come up with. I'd like them to explore some alternative, drop designs and maybe have a look at the bad luck mitigation in more places, like the Corrupted Gauntlet, and I'm not just saying that because I'm dry for an enhanced. But yeah, I think when it comes to new content, new mechanics, they'll think of something much better than what I'm able to think of right here on the spot, so,
I'm
uh,
definitely
I trust them.
I definitely want to put a pin in dry protection. It's definitely going to be something I'm very excited to touch on with you here. But when it comes to just content in general, I'm very similar to you. I think that for the most part, the content that we've been getting has been extraordinarily high quality. Like I think a lot of people might be kind of doom and gloom about some stuff, especially older players. But I mean, as a newer player, as someone who doesn't have a level of bias toward older content or even newer content, because it's all new content to me, technically, right? I it's such a obvious difference in quality in my humble opinion comparing content from 2007, from 2013, 2014, 2015 to 2026. It's just like such a obvious difference. Like even today after all the changes that happened in Corrend, it pales in comparison to Varlamore to me. Just like in regard to
Oh, for
how
sure.
it's like night and day. And this is after the rework. Like after most of Corrend has been reworked. I think only two regions remain, right? We still need the Lovakenge and the Arceus rework. Other than that, it's almost all post 2018, post 2019 new stuff. And even then, it feels like there's such a dramatic difference in quality between both those regions. So like it's it's so obvious to me that the new stuff is just so much there's just so much more consideration placed. Like I always call it out, but like Veil Totems, like I can't imagine Jagex from 2015 or Jagex from 2006 even adding something like Veil Totems. It's such an intelligently designed training activity. I love Veil Totems so much. But so yeah, I definitely echo with what you're saying, and I'm also a sailing enjoyer. I always find it kind of interesting when I see people kind of like, well, now that I'm max, like I don't, there's nothing to do with the skill, and I'm like, okay, so like 90% of other skills, like there's really nothing. Like,
Yeah.
are you still chopping
Where are you
logs?
doing your
Like,
post 99 fire making,
yeah,
bro?
or wood cutting, or hunter, or even or construction, or smithing, or mining, or fishing. I guess fishing if you're an Ironman, maybe. Like it's yeah, it's a very silly argument because, and that's the problem. I think I called this out in my sailing video, or at least one of the videos where I talk about it, where I'm like, that's the problem with biting off such a huge skill, such an innovative and new type of skill, where there's half of the community that wants something traditional and old school, and the other half of the community expecting something revolutionary and different, and you can't do both. Like you kind of either have to make a skill feel like an old school skill, which unfortunately for old school skills means a skill that stops being useful after level 87, which is most skills in the game, frankly, except combat skills, herb lore, prayer. No, even prayer. What am I saying? Combat skills, herb lore, farming maybe, and slayer. I think are the only and construction kind of, but you can boost. Other than that, most skills really drop off in relevance after like level 87, in regard to what you can use them to do other than just get levels. And I'm sure I'm forgetting one, but so like they kind of had to do that with sailing just to fit the vibe of it being an old school skill. But for me, it's like, man, sailing should have been even more experimental, even crazier. But I
Right.
understand why it can't be, because it needs to fit that archetype of OSRS skill. Maybe in like 3 skills down the line, we can get that true innovative and iterative experience, right? I don't know, but I don't know what your thoughts on that are. I'm curious.
It's well, yeah, it's sometimes I look back at the entire polling situation of proposing a new skill and how people react now, and I'm like, imagine for a second that Jagex came and fire making wasn't in the game, and they pitched fire making as a skill, which I think we can all agree, fire making is by far the worst skill in this entire game, conceptually.
Conceptually,
The only
yes.
the only reason people don't mind it is because it's super fast to train with, like, Wintertodt or Redwoods or whatever, but conceptually, it is by far the weakest skill because it has almost 0 uses outside of literally burning wood. And I think if Jagex were to pitch that idea, like, right now, as a new skill, 1% of people would vote in favor for it, because it is such a bad concept. So for them to indeed have to create something that is still has that old school feel, but is mechanically interesting and has all this like wide ranges of content, I think sailing was the way to go. And I think like I have my criticisms about sailing. Naturally, like combat is not in the place that we want it to be. I think that anyone wants it to be. But I really enjoyed the trials.
Mhm.
And I've like salvaging is a very, very good example of like every skill has or most skills have that one very nice AFK activity. And I think salvaging is so nice.
Yeah, I also love the trials. And I also think combat's terrible. In fact, I think they shouldn't have even launched with combat. Seeing what's happening right now with combat and sailing, like I think they could have just not launched with combat and just further focused on making the existing systems a bit deeper, rather than just like creating a wider net of systems, but some of them just functionally didn't work. Like combat was terrible.
I think most people are not engaging with combat anyway, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, like I would say like trawling is a great example of something that should have been invested in heavier, because on its surface, it's probably one of the coolest training methods in the game. A lot of people haven't done it because it's such a pain to set up, but it's a really cool system where like you're following shoals and you're adjusting the depth of your net, and you have to like move your boat. And if you move your boat with the moving shoal, you can keep catching the fish. It creates this really interesting rhythm to the concept of fishing, but it currently lacks a lot of QOL to make it like a satisfying method. It currently gives way too little experience for how click intensive it is, and there's a level of annoyance with with having to like manage your UI a lot to make it function. But like
right.
it feels like a beta version of what could be one of the coolest fishing training methods, or the coolest fishing training method in the entire game. Um, and I'm like, it's a bummer that I feel like a lot of the dev time was split between combat, that, and other stuff. When if we just cut combat, it could have made one of the coolest fishing training methods in the game. That would have been just a objective W for the skill itself. Salvaging wise, uh, I love a lot about salvaging. I am controversially for sure. I'm very critical with how good salvaging is. That's my main like, and I know a lot of people who don't like sailing are definitely gonna especially disagree with me here. But like, I think I like AFK options for skills. Like I really, really do. But I don't think AFK options should be as lucrative and insanely high experience as salvaging. I think it's so crazy to me that you can essentially AFK your way to like 35 million gold, from like level 88 to 90, 99, sorry, by straight up just not playing the game. It's that's what I did on my Iron Man. Like it's kind of crazy. Like I feel like an AFK method should really be low output, like really low output, but like okay experience, where like 45, 50k is totally fine for a gathering skill. But like it cannot be as lucrative as it is. Even though I love the idea of salvaging having elements of loot to it, I think that's really cool. That's part of the fun of actually breaking down all the salvage you get or whatever, or I don't know what's the word, sifting through it. All the salvage, that's a really fun element, but I feel like it's maybe a bit too lucrative for how AFK it is. I know maybe that's a hot take for a lot of people, but that was always my attitude with salvaging.
I don't think that's necessarily a hot take. I think I think a lot of people will tend to agree. I think it's there. Jagex, of course, had an incentive to speed up sailing a little bit more compared to the other gathering skills, right? Because people didn't want the same old slow skill. I feel like the community wanted sailing to be a faster skill to get to 99 than say a an agility or a rune crafting, and not only through very active methods. So I think the XP rates for salvaging are probably fine, but I agree with you that the loot in especially at the high end is maybe a bit overkill. But
I almost
I
wish
hadn't really thought about it.
I almost wish that there was a level of balance there where you'd have to sacrifice some of your loot to gain like the current XP rates. But because I really like the idea of salvage having loot associated with it. That's a really awesome, fun, exciting, and thematically appropriate idea. But but you either have to get virtually no experience for how much it offers right now, or you would have to remove the loot, in my opinion, to make it more balanced. And to me, the solution to that should be just you should be like it feels kind of bad to say. I know people are gonna probably disagree with me, but like I think they should cut the experience from just actually breaking down the salvage, because that way, if you want optimal experience rates, you'd have to actually do salvage and drop that. But if you want much less experience, but the loot too, you would have to actually break it down. So like
Right.
yeah, it's not like an ideal solution. It's not the best thing ever, but like there needs to, man, it's so much gold. Like you consider how much money you're making chopping redwoods from 90 to 99 by comparison to salvage. I think it's like 10 to 1. It's like so, and it's like so disproportionate, and it's arguably more AFK than redwoods. So it's just like holy shit, that's crazy. But maybe that's yeah, that's my thing. But overall, I think salvaging is a great addition. Like I really like it. It's thematically great. The animations are great. It feels great to do. I really like salvaging overall. It's just that specific like imbalance between what you get out of it and how you get the thing is kind of wacky, especially compared to like the trials, which as you pointed out are great content. But like I feel like most people just defaulted to salvaging because yeah, 70K an hour while making gold compared to optimally sweating, getting 200K an hour or 220K an hour and getting nothing else out of it. Like, why wouldn't I just AFK and make money in the process, right?
Yeah, and I think that kind of balance is always something you need to strike like exactly right. Where I feel like something like shooting stars is sort of the universally accepted. I'm working from home, but I still want to gain some XP activity. Uh, and salvaging almost feels like it should be in that ballpark. It's of course a little more active than shooting stars, but in that sense, it makes sense to like really crash down on the XP rates to make it so that when you are done with work or when you come home and you actually have time to play, that you have to make this decision like, do I want to keep not playing the game for 30K XP an hour, or do I want to, engage in this fairly cool activity, but not being able to fully focus on my second monitor where I'm watching a series or a YouTube video for 100K XP an hour?
Yeah, that's exactly my attitude as well. And I also feel like having some level of token loot is just always fun too. Like one of the big points I'm critical of from sepulcher standpoint is that to actually get experience that's not dog shit, you have to sacrifice all the loot you would obtain except from the actual coffer at the very end, which just kind of sucks because like that's the whole thing, is that you're not only doing the hardest skill and content in the entire game, maybe up there with trials now, um, and on top of that, you're getting some good rewards and like decent experience rates. I say decent because even at its peak, Sepulcher is only like 20K above just the Arty rooftop, which is so
Yeah.
awful. Like that is actually terrible. What an awful proposition. But I hope eventually we're going to get to that place of maybe during a summer sweep up, which spurred this initial conversation of like potentially touching up um, things like the sepulcher experience rates. And again, I know there's a lot of people that are very coy or not coy, but like cautious about buffing up agility. And that really isn't the solution to the skill. I want to be very clear here with my perspective. I don't think the solution to agility is just making it faster. It does not need to be another fire making. The solution to agility is finding a way to actually make it fun and good, not just fast XP. But that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. Um Yeah, it's interesting. There's some things that Jagex just came out with. Like, if you look at like mastering mixology, for example, where they try to have this activity where you can sort of try and semi AFK it, that you don't have to be tick perfect with your method. So with mastering mixology, you can just click on one table and wait until your potion is finished. But it feels very sort of punishing by just not doing the mechanics that you're faced with because it's not really that AFK anyway, which I think is one of the reasons mastering mixology doesn't really work. Um, and I think that balance is just so hard to strike. Like how do you promote active gameplay over something more AFK without making the active gameplay too rewarding?
Yeah, I'm in
Or the
the.
AFK gameplay too lackluster.
I'm curious if you would agree with me here, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. My take generally is that there should never be a place in the game from a skilling standpoint where you're not doing something for more than 6 seconds unless it's an AFK method. So if it's an AFK method, perfect, right? Like minute, 2 minutes, whatever, it works. But there should never be a place where you're like have to look at your screen for 6 seconds without clicking something. Because that to me creates that agility rooftop situation of you're watching canned animations most of the time that are boring, samey, annoying, and not exciting. And then you're not really thinking about anything else, which creates too much activity to be AFK, but too few actual engaging activities to be an actual engaging training method, right? Like there's that weird in between of like not being AFK, but also not being interesting that agility really hits well, but a lot of other skills kind of have that issue. And I think mastering mixology is an example of that, where like there's just too much downtime to make me excited about looking at the game, but too little AFK time to make me, actually appreciate it as an AFK training method, right?
I think you have a good point there in the sort of waiting for the animations to finish, in the sense that when you look at agility, I think one of my more tolerable methods of training, which I didn't actually use, I think I went to rooftops most of the time, because I often train on like mobile or on my iPad when I'm watching a series. But the Brimhaven agility arena is actually something where you spend a couple seconds going like to your pillar, and then you can see, all right, now I got 30 seconds break, and I can just wait here and wait for the next one, which I think is a decent balance, because then you're getting like a full on 30-second break without having to pay actual attention to your monitor, and then you go back to your sort of agility things, where I think they can speed up the animations a little bit, but I don't think it's as egregious in Brimhaven as it is in other places.
Yeah, agreed. I'm very like I hate that like downtime element of it if I need to pay attention. Like I always want to be in control of my character when I'm doing something that requires a level of attention. That's always been my take on it. And I think agility, I hate agility so much outside of just the systems design of agility and just not having any good rewards and just being not like an interesting skill at all. Beyond all that, it's also just not like an interesting skill to like engage or interface with other than sepulcher, but it feels like sepulcher is interesting, and if only it wasn't for all of those other features of agility that are detracting from what is otherwise a really cool method like sepulcher.
Yeah.
How do you feel like they can well, I'm curious, like do you have any ideas for how what would you do to agility if you were a game designer at Jagex and you were given the agility remaster project? What would you do if you could choose a couple things to like make the skill a bit more exciting, I guess, or interesting?
Well, I'd probably start off by handing in my letter of resignation. because I because I am not fit for that job. Um, what would I do to I think Sepulcher is a great piece of content. I don't like that agility doesn't really have um a a hybrid method. So, for example, if you look at leagues, and I've heard multiple people say this, there's something extremely satisfying about the task where you have to hop on 666 stones in Yama's lair
Yeah.
because it's a one tick agility method. I think if you make an agility course that is like fully one tickable, uh, but it is a regular agility course. Maybe it goes into a couple branches, and maybe there's some stuff you have to dodge, but not like on a sepulcher level. But you can one tick the entire thing. I think that would be kind of fun. I think it would feel very smooth for players, and that's something they would enjoy. It takes away what you're saying about, you're watching your player do animations most of the time. But if I see how many people like somewhat enjoying the just hopping around on tiles for 666 steps, I think that could be a decent shot at an agility training method.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's always something I've been saying where like if agility honed in on precision, which it kind of thematically makes sense, right? Like if agility was all about being precise with your movement and your clicks, that actually makes sense as an idea for agility, right? Like you are being precise with your mouse clicks, you're being agile with your mouse clicks, and therefore your character, is doing agile things. I like that idea a lot, and that's something I've always pitched. And I think it was Mod Rice who told me very something kind of interesting where for as much as I think most developers that are currently most devs, mods, whatever that work on the game are want that to be a thing. Like they want agility to have that like new air of excitement to it. But the issue is that right now the reality of Sepulcher is that it's like a mega rare. It's currently stifling all agility activities just through the nature of it existing and how bad the experience rates are. Where like if you create an activity that is like more attention and skill driven than rooftops, but less attention and skill driven than Hollowed Sepulcher, it literally can't exist because like there's not
There's no
enough
XP gap
space.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like why would anyone do an 80k an hour thing that's more intensive and more difficult when they can just do the RD rooftops? Or if they're really passionate, can do Sepulcher for like 100k an hour, right? Like that's the problem where like agility needs a lot more space, and that's partly why I advocate for things like Sepulcher. If you're sacrificing all experience, should be more like 150, 170, 180, maybe even 200k, similar to the Barracuda trials for people that are doing it really well. Like for tick perfect players, you're yes. But the issue with another problem with Sepulcher too is that because its improvement is so much less impressive or like essentially it's 20k above RD, right? And the problem is that it takes
Yeah.
so long to learn to do Sepulcher really well to the point where it is 20k above RD. You might as well have just been doing RD rooftops the whole time because your chances are, as a normal player that's not like no monkey skill level or just like a really good player, it doesn't have to be no monkey. The amount of time it takes you to fail Sepulchers over and over, floor fours and fives and whatever.
Yeah, the opportunity cost is
Yeah,
just yeah.
you've essentially
No, that makes
spent
sense.
like you've essentially become a sweaty player for like 5 to 10% more experience at most, and it's like, is that worth it for most players? The answer, I think, as we've seen with how popular Sepulcher is, no, it's not. Most people do not want to engage, right?
But I don't necessarily think that that is a very strong argument because it does make you like learning Sepulcher makes you a better player, which is something that there's many activities in game that will make you a better player where you're gonna die a lot of the times first, like the first couple of times you're gonna learn Inferno, you're gonna die, but it's gonna make you a better player. And same goes for Sepulcher. It teaches you so much about movement and where your character actually is, and if you're using your True Tile plugin, for example, um, it teaches you so much about that if you go learn Sepulcher and then go straight into Gauntlet, for example, you're gonna have a way better time at Gauntlet than someone who stuck to RD rooftops and hasn't done Gauntlet before.
I completely agree with you, but I guess my counterpoint would be that why wouldn't you just go to Gauntlet, which is lossless, can give you 150 million gold, and also like, you know, actually gives you like crazy, crazy good Alex and stuff for less time investment, and will make you better at other PVM and progress your character or your account, as opposed to just going to Sepulcher, which gives you nothing but slightly better agility experience, a skill that's already kind of useless. And I guess like that would be like my overarching like issue where like I want Sepulcher to be an outlet for players to get better at the game, but there's not enough incentive for people to actually do Sepulcher to become better at the game. So there's right now a much better proposition of just going to do the PVM, especially PVM like Hunlif and the Corrupted Gauntlet that has no loss, right? You die, you're only losing time because there's no material cost to actually engage with it. Same applies to raids in a roundabout sense too.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
I guess that's something I really wish would happen with Sepulcher. It's like either buff up the loot, I guess, or make it not feel like you have to sacrifice all your experience to actually interface with the looting system before the final floor, or just buff the experience rates and actually give more people an avenue to actually engage with it and interface with it and stuff. That I really want to see that happen, but I don't know. Maybe during the summer sweep up there'll be a poll like should we buff Sepulcher a little bit, and maybe I would, if I were Jagex, I would say like, hey, the reason we're doing this not just because we want agility to be faster, but because that gives us more opportunity to create better content for agility down the line. I think that might make players more amicable to that, because I obviously love your idea of making like lossless tick perfect actions like the Yama agility course a thing, you know?
Yeah, I think it's indeed right now. It's just a very difficult space for Jagex to work with. You saw with the release of like the colossal worm thing, where they pitched it as this thing where you can get amylase crystals a little bit faster, and that was it. And I don't think you even get them faster um, from the course. Maybe they changed it in the meantime. I'm not sure, but there's such limited reward space for them to work with that yeah, the XP gap doesn't make sense for such a course, and what other rewards are you gonna tie, into such an activity? It's a tough ask, which is exactly why I would hand in my letter of resignation on day 1 of the job.
I think if I was like tasked with just making one change to agility that would incentivize people to actually like do it, I would make it so if you hit 99 agility, you have infinite run energy, just passively. Ever keep everything else the same, but if you were just do one systemic change, give everybody with 99 agility infinite run energy, and I could genuinely see like thousands of players choosing to grind agility just for that immense quality of life improvement. So like I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I saw a similar suggestion on Twitter today. I think maybe it was Nine Rain. I'm not sure. But someone made a similar tweet. But I think the important caveat here is that unlimited run energy should exist outside of combat instances. Um, because I think there is a lot of room and a lot of unused room as well for Jagex to play around with having to like players having to have manage their run energy. Like at Zuck, for example, or if you're doing solo Cox, I think there's much more they can do with that, and I think it's good that they have that, and you don't want to devalue stamina potions all the way, right? It will be good if stamina potions are still useful for like some type of PVM content. But when it comes to like outside these specific encounters and like you're doing your clue scrolls and you have 100% run energy or whatever, yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I'm mixed on like the reasoning, not yours. Just I because I know that I've heard that argument. I'm like okay with that like compromise, but I am a little bit mixed on like the reasoning for the compromise. I'm just okay with it because I think it would be cool. But like for example, right? Like as someone who just recently did semi recently did my Inferno, like I didn't have to bring stamina pots. Like the agility changes that they did last year, kind of you don't need to do that anymore. You don't
Right.
run out of run energy. And with Cox, like with solo Cox, I almost wonder if it's like such a niche activity that like how much what functionally changes if you have two slots or even just one slot if you're decent at it taken up by a stamina pot. I think stamina pots in general like I'm almost critical of their existence because it makes Herblore have more of an impact on your run energy than anything in agility, which is like that's such a laughable thing. That just proves just how pointless agility is as a skill. Where like, yeah, of course, Herblore, already one of the most impactful and influential skills in the entire game, also solves run energy for you. But even then, it's like the idea of stamina pots also kind of like mitigate or remove the incentive to train agility because of their existence, and simultaneously are the solve to any interesting potentially interesting run energy driven management system where like, okay, well, all that I really need to do is just spend one of my inventory slots to have a stamina pot, which in and of itself is kind of an interesting choice. Like, can I do it without it? Can I do it with it? How many do I need? That's part of the interesting element of itemization in old school. But like, is that like a super valuable facet of the end game? Or I would love to hear people's thoughts on that. Like I'm asking that like super genuinely. Like personally, I think I'm like on it, but there could very well be mechanics that I just haven't thought of because I'm not super creative, that Jagex has or Jagex wants to implement that would have run energy be a unique element of it. Like, what if there was a mechanic that requires you to walk or or doesn't function if you have full brain, right? Like things like that. There could very well be that could very well be the case, right?
Yeah, I think like one. How am I going to say this? I think I definitely agree with your point that stamina potions as a solution where it's just bring one into the raid and you've covered you can ignore the mechanics. Well, it's not ignoring the mechanics, it's solving the mechanics, and solving the problem through bringing a stamina potion, which I'm not sure if I like that concept. I was indeed more talking about using run energy in a future design space where indeed you can only hit this boss if you're walking, for example, or there's just some mechanics moving around in whatever the fight encounter is that are only maneuverable when you're at a walking speed. Um, I think stuff like that is interesting, or where places where your run energy will drain a lot faster, for example. So you have accelerated run energy depletion, but you need your run energy for some elements of the fight. I think that can be interesting. So you need to manage it as a resource carefully. Like there's plenty of fights where players will, if they have to dodge an attack, they will run to the other side of the room, right? Because you see a big fireball coming your way, for example, you run to the other side of the room. That's your first instinct. Well, in reality, most of the times you can walk one or two tiles and you will dodge the same attack. I think it's something you'll see with a lot of people that are starting out to do Vorkath. They see the big ball coming and they click a mile away.
Yeah.
And experienced players know that's two tiles away, and you start attacking again. And I think for those kinds of situations where you say, okay, you have uh, accelerated run drain during these attacks, so you get punished if you're moving further away than necessary, and you're gonna need that run energy for another phase of the fight. Something like that is something that could be interesting. I'm just saying keep run energy a thing within combat systems because I think there's room to design around it. But stamina potions, I'm very indifferent about stamina potions. I don't think I've actually touched one since the agility rebalance. So
Yeah. I'm pretty much the same way. I think like I definitely see value in having run energy driven things. I think one of the Yama contracts actually is around that. Of course, it's solved by just bringing stamina pots, but generally there is some creativity there possible. I know fights that would otherwise require stamina pots, things like the Inferno or even Verzik, just no longer really do. I never, when I was learning TOB months back, like I never actually brought stamina pots into TOB, except maybe like once or twice because I was like scared. But even with full Oath Blade, a full inventory of switches, I never actually run out of run energy. And if I did, it's because something went drastically wrong with the fight. Maybe like two people died or something. Like
right.
so and it's like the problem with that I think is that to fix that you potentially need to make things more frustrating for people, and that to me is not a worthwhile. I'm very open. Honestly, like I'm sure there are much more creative people than me that have some really cool ideas for how to integrate run energy well in a fight. That doesn't just make it feel kind of like a tedious kind of thing to micromanage. And I'd be very interested to see that. I think it's very cool. Honestly, it's a cool concept. I'm always for more like systemic depth or mechanical depth in the game that isn't just like breaking pathing or something. You know, like, well, that's cool. That's cool immersion stuff. Like, I don't know if every boss needs that to exist. Like, I'm cool with some bosses just having intuitive mechanics and stuff too.
No, exactly. I think I just think it's a mechanic. It's already in the game. If you remove it from a potential PVM space, you're just removing complexity for the sake of complexity, which means that down the line you're gonna have to reintroduce another layer of complexity that currently isn't in the game. So why not just make use of the systems we already have?
Yeah, that's super reasonable. Talking about systems we already have or systems we don't already have but could potentially. Dry protection. What's your opinion on dry protection? Like, how do you feel about it? Should it exist in the game? Is it only should it only exist in certain content? You know, things like that.
Oh, you're really poking the beehive here, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, should it's such a it's a question with no absolute answer, right? Should dry protection be in the game? Yes, but not in every place. Uh, I think is the correct answer.
Mhm.
At least for me. I think there's the thing I love most about the statistics videos I've created so far is I come across all these different forms of dry protection as the game has progressed and as new content has released, or bad luck mitigation. I don't think dry protection outside of diary and quest items should ever be in the form of you did 50 KC, here's your item for a drop rate of 1 in 50, like the Vorkav head, you know?
Mhm.
Which I think for a Vorkav head, it's fine because it's not that tangible of an upgrade. Same goes for a KQ head, you know, where you get it at, what is it, 256,
Yeah, something like that.
if you
Yeah.
haven't gotten it before. Like those are fine, but I don't think that should apply anywhere else in the game because it what makes a drop feel so rewarding and full of dopamine is the fact that it's unexpected. And I think every drop, every meaningful drop that you get in the game should be unexpected. Now, there's a lot of ways to do dry protection while still keeping that feeling. So not saying, "Hey, you're gonna get this item at twice the rate, 3 times the rate, 4 times the rate," whatever. Um, and one of my favorites actually that I didn't realize was in game before I started making a video about it was I was playing another MMO, Winds of Valen, and there it showed that the draw. I was mining something, and if you're mining, you have this 2% chance of getting a gem, like a power gem, while mining. Um, and it shows that you have a 2% chance in the top right of your screen. And as I was mining, the 2% changed to 2.1%. And I was like, oh, that is interesting. This the dynamic drop rate, where the longer you do an activity, the more common the drop becomes up to a certain cap. Um, that was because then you feel like you're making progress, even though you're not getting the drop, but you're never being guaranteed the drop. I think it's a really clever system, and then I found out that the system is actually in place for the Desert Treasure 2 quartzes. And I think some people pointed out that there's one other thing in the game where it's also where it also works like that. But I think that is one of the most clever ways of dry protection. Then I'm a big fan of dupe protection at moons, albeit it 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 depends a little bit on what kind of content you introduce it as at, right? Because there's some pieces of content where you really want this one item to be very valuable, and if you get that early and you're then dealing with dupe protection, while you really, as a main, want to get that item over and over and over again, you feel like you're being punished for getting that item early. Um, so it's maybe it's something you can toggle on or off to
Yeah.
protection. I don't know. I don't know what the correct answer is there, but in general, I'm a big fan of do protection at moons. Uh, I'm I'm quite a fan of the Vestige system. Vestige, never know how to pronounce it, but
Mm.
the Desert Treasure 2 rings, where you have to hit a drop on a table 3 times before you get the actual drop, because so what that does is it takes away the space where a player can get absurdly lucky, right? You will never get a 1 KC, ring or a 2 KC ring, and a 3 KC ring is on, like, almost impossible, but theoretically possible. But that is more than compensated, for me at least, by the fact that you cannot go, or well, very, very rarely go 5 times, 6 times the drop rate. So this entire distribution gets squeezed more towards this middle while still having a fair amount of randomness, which is a system I really like.
Mm. Yeah, I am. I'm pretty amicable to most of what you said. I think like for me, I agree that I don't think there should be a hard dry protection system ever in the game. I think there's, as you pointed out, certain some items like the quartzes, the muspa attachment to the ancient staff, the Vorkath head, which require like 50 kills and stuff. That's all totally fine. Like a QOL thing, like the Fasani's Nightmare Tablet as well, all fine to have just at a certain limit. You just
Yeah,
get it, or a
exactly.
certain case you just get it. Totally reasonable. I think for actual real uniques that have a real big impact in your account, not having those like hard limits to how much you have to grind create less it creates less determinism, but there's always this really big point of friction between determinism in a game and just full reliance on RNG. And I think determinism detracts a lot from the feeling and just the general motivation to do something, because you at that point you don't see as much value in any individual kill. You're actually forced to look at everything in a broader sense, which can create a lot of like fatigue when you're doing something, right? When you know that after 300 kills, you'll get something that might feel nice when you get there, but when you're at 10 kills, you're like, my God, this is an insurmountable mountain to climb. And it feels like it's just weighing down on me so much. And that's where I think determinism not only takes away excitement from the RNG aspects of a drop, but also add a lot more fatigue to an initial grind or the beginning of a grind. You almost never want to start it when you know you have to spend such a long time for it. Obviously, you still have the chance of getting it, which is nice. But I think that like it's a lot of psychological pressure, which creates a lot of like difficulty in creating a argument for a lack of dry protection, because people that are for it are much more likely to just be like, well, what you're saying right now is super intangible. It doesn't make any sense. Who cares about psychology? Just make things easier to get. But I think player psychology is crucial, especially in an MMO. And that's why I'm like you, not for a hard protection system. I think soft dry protection is generally positive. As you pointed out, I love dupe protection. I think it should just be a toggle on every boss. You can just click a button where the clog is and you can just choose dupes or no dupes. Like, I think for mains, you'd probably choose no dupes unless you're clogging, because you want to get 10 prims and no Pegasians. But for an Iron Man that just looks for one of each, that's fine too. Like, I don't think that detracts from anything in the game. Um, and finally, the way my favorite dry protection systems in the game has to be Oathblade shards. I really love the way Oathblade
Yeah.
shards are integrated, because not only are they a soft dry protection system where eventually you can just make the thing, but it allows more economic growth within those specific drops, and it creates an outlet for a cool mechanic in the game too, where you're considering multiple different things. Like, not only just the mechanic of creating the item is unique and just really unique as a smithing mechanic. The way you do it is very unique, which I really like. Shout out to Mod Rice who created that. But also, it creates a lot of consideration for where you're doing it, how many kills you're doing, what items you're crafting, when you choose to craft. Like, those were all the thought processes that I had with my group Ironman when we were grinding Yama, because I went so dry. I went like 1200 KC completely dry, I only got 2 horns. That dry protection system saved my ass, and it was interesting to wait to see what to craft and when. That creates more depth, and it makes you think about a game more. And when you are thinking about a game more, that's when you become more connected to it. And I think that's something that's really facilitated by these soft dry protection systems. So that's my roundabout answer to what you brought up. And I generally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't mention Oathblade shards, because it's indeed it's such a good system, and I think Oathblade shards, along with the dynamic drop rate, that I mentioned both hit the same scratch that I would like to have implemented in a lot of places in the game, which is every kill or every couple kills, you feel like you are making progress towards your drop without guaranteeing it.
Yeah.
So like with a regular drop, what makes the gauntlet so depressing at some points, or any other boss, is you can do 400 corrupted gauntlet KC, not get an enhanced, and well, most people won't feel this way because psychologically it works different, but from a purely mathematical standpoint, you are nowhere closer to getting that enhanced than you were at 0 KC, which is just an extremely harsh truth. And I think that that is something that has its place in the game. Maybe, I'm not sure. There's certain points where that might have a place, but I think you've if you've done 400 corrupted gauntlet KC, um, maybe let's make it such that the drop rate has now changed, and make it 20% more common or something. I'm just throwing out numbers. But
Yeah.
so that you at least know, like, hey, I've invested this much into this grind, but at least from here on out, the grind is gonna be a little easier, right? It's gonna be a little more common every time I try it now. And off plate shards achieve that same effect, albeit once every couple of kills, only when you get the shards, because you don't get the shards on every kill, of course. But it has the same type of effects, which I really like. And what you said about the fact that it introduces this entire economic space is just it's so brilliantly designed, really.
Yeah, I'm very like amicable to that Oathblade system, rather than just like a passive background mechanic, only because it allows that extra consideration happening, or where you're planning around having this tangible item that now you can use for something, rather than just like knowing that the chance is getting higher. Because while that feels good, that also in a weird sense feels worse when you continue to go dry. When you have those drop rate increases and you're still dry, it makes you even more annoyed, which is actually what I think a lot of people experienced in leagues, where the 5x drop rates are noticeable until they aren't, and when they aren't noticeable, you're like 10 times more annoyed when you're dry at something in leagues, because it feels so weird. It feels like it shouldn't happen, which is why, for example, I think leagues should just have a dry protection system. Frankly, like I don't think you should go 5x overrate in leagues. I think that's insane for a limited time game mode. I actually do want a full dry protection system in leagues, like 3x overrate. You're guaranteed the drop. I don't really care. People only play leagues for like a week or two. Why the fuck are we this passionate about whatever? But when it comes to the main game, being able to facilitate further consideration, further mechanics, further like interesting like systemic depth through a dry protection system would be interesting. But a background like mechanism that functions without your knowledge, or just like with your passive knowledge, I think might create even more frustration than it needs to, in the very same way that leagues does, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure if it does, but I kind of I do see your point. The one issue I have with an off-play chart system, although I do think it's a great design system, is that um it still sort of gets you closer to a deterministic endpoint, um, which I'm not necessarily always in favor of. It certainly has its place, especially with Oathblade, where you're usually getting two drops, and then you have to smith the third one, which I think is a really nice sweet spot where they sort of balance that around. Now, if you're very unlucky and very dry, you might be dealing differently, and you might end up smithing all three pieces. Um, but the fact that sort of I don't think you should ever know that your next kill is gonna be your final kill, if that makes sense. Which is not necessarily the chance at Oathblades, because you still need the final shard drop. Um, which is what makes it a better design system. But it's a very hard thing to balance, because otherwise you're getting close to sort of this fully deterministic, hey, you've done your 200 KC, here's your item, get out of here and go to the next thing, which absolutely should be the thing in leagues. I fully agree. Um, I spent too much time at Alchemical Hydra without a lens to show for it, that I am now fully on board the dry protection in leaks train.
Yeah, I did so many I think I did like 90 or whatever deep delves before I saw a Doom unit, and it was just like it was so miserable in leagues. It was awful. But the so yeah, I definitely agree with that. When it comes to Oathblade shards, yeah, I'm definitely not in support of just adding it to all pieces of content. It wouldn't even make sense thematically, like why everything can be crafted by an item. But like ultimately, for the big like quintessential pieces, like I think it's reasonable. It's reasonable to have a system like Oathblade in mind, especially if there's also dupe protection involved, where you can like if there's dupe protection involved, I'm almost amicable to not having dry protection because the dupe protection acts like a dry protection system in and of itself. But even then, like there's definitely a lot of like interesting factors there. The second thing I want to bring up in relation to dry protection and just loot chances in general is actually more transparency with loot chances. Period. This is something I've become further and further passionate or more and more passionate about as I play the game more, and I'm watching a lot of like unguided people play the game, people like Mad Season, who aren't aware of the chances of something dropping, and that makes them go for like meme drops. And that to me is an unintentional side effect of designing around a wiki, where I don't think anyone in their right mind, I don't even think Jagex intends anyone to do Wintertod for the Dragon Hatchet. I think it's just a byproduct of potentially doing Wintertod. You could maybe roll that chance at a Dragon Hatchet, or Dragon Axe. But like the problem there is a lot of people that don't just use the wiki for everything aren't aware that it's a meme drop. You're not supposed to do it. So when they do it for an extended period of time and don't get it, they either feel like they're unlucky or they feel like the game's fucking them over. And to me, there's a very fine way or a very simple way that you can actually like hint at a drop rate without also just like spelling it out for people, especially for more complex stuff like Doom items, which are of a very complicated algorithm for the way a drop is earned. So like things like in a collection log, you should be able to just mouse over a piece of gear and see whether it's common, uncommon, rare, very rare, or extremely rare. Or maybe it's even color coded from green to like dark red, where based on that, you kind of have an idea of whether it's a meme grind or if it's like a normal grind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I definitely welcome that change that you're mentioning. The thing is, I know that there's a lot of flack for RuneScape being a game that's designed around a wiki. Um, but it is the reality of the game that we live in. And if you look at Matt Season Show and Unguided, who like, oh my god, they make such great series and they're extremely entertaining. But um those are, at the end of the day, self-imposed restrictions where you cannot design the game around problems people are dealing with self-imposed restrictions, right? So I think the majority of players are very aware that there is a wiki, and that the wiki should be used for a lot of things. I mean, it's an entire reason the wiki button is in the game. I think it should actually be just included on Tutorial Island, like as an explicit mechanic. Like, hey, find out more by pressing the wiki button here and then clicking on that thing, or something to the extent you don't actually want to have players click on the wiki button and click on something else, but just really point them in that direction. Because the wiki is so good, right? The wiki elevates this game to an entirely new level, and I think every player should be in contact with the wiki. Now, having said that, I still think your change is a good idea. I think opening the collection log and then going to Wintertod and seeing like a very deep dark purple at the Dragon X, like it's extremely rare from this source, makes a lot of sense, and I think that's well, dare I say it, a fairly easy change, but knowing RuneScape code, it probably isn't.
Yeah, and I want to also just say that it's not technically my idea. I think I talked to this. I talked about this with I want to say Mod Sween, and it was kind of his suggestion, like maybe we can color code it. And I'm like, yes, I like that. So shout out. But the um, I agree with you. Ultimately, I do agree. I don't think that every facet of the wiki, or even most facets of the wiki, should be implemented into the main game. It's always this like push and pull of what would make the game better if it was in game versus what is the benefit of having it be on the wiki, right? And it's the same kind of question you have for what emergent mechanic is exploitative or an exploit that's bad for the game, and what emergent mechanic is actually great and adds depth, or which plugin
Well, that's a
is
hot topic right now.
yeah, it is a hot topic. Or even like what plugin, for example, is something they can just include in the main client as opposed to just keep it as a plugin, right? Like things like menu entry swapper are so foundational to making things in the game palatable, like thieving, for example, that without it, you're essentially playing a game like 5x worse. And taking that idea and putting it into the base game is nothing but a positive. And I think that's the kind of like, meanwhile, things like farming timers probably don't need to have that in the main game, right? So like it's a very like it's a cherry picked kind of thing, but there is a lot of value in taking some things that are clearly adopted by the majority of the player base because they're so helpful and because they just make the game better. And things like not pursuing meme grinds because the game doesn't do a good enough job of explaining the way its drop rates work. I think that's a fair enough compromise without just explicitly like listing out drops or even changing things. Like I don't want them to remove the dragon hatchet from the winter tot table. I just want it to be more explicit over what's tenably acquirable. And the last thing I'll say is that the wiki, I'm very positive about it. And there was a time where I think I was a lot more gung ho over adding more integration into the main game, not just wiki integration, but mechanical integration of like keeping things a bit more, smooth and frictionless. But after a long conversation with Mod Rice, he brought up a really good point about the way the wiki enhances your gameplay in some ways, and it made me think deeper about the system. And I think I talked to Idle about this in my prior episode with him, where the use of the wiki in old school RuneScape is very similar to like intertext in a book, like a novel, where the way you engage with it is a lot more like cross dimensional or like meta, wherein you are doing your own research, and that adds to the satisfaction of actually playing the game itself. It's like you're a web detective alongside just someone playing a game, and that creates a lot of like really interesting interconnected points of satisfaction. You're not only just figuring a mechanic out, you had to also go and figure out how to figure it out. And that's an undervalued and under-discussed feature of the way old school RuneScape works. And it's a feature that disappears if everything becomes too frictionless.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like in RuneScape, you have the old like everything is a one small favor, except especially if you're an Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
Um, where you have this, I want to achieve this, and in order to do that, I want to get this. Like classic example for early accounts used to be I want to get 70 prayer. For that, I want to do blue dragons. But for that, I really want to have access to the agility shortcut in Tervally Dungeon, which means I have to get 70 agility. But for that, I bound to get Graceful first, probably. So I have to do Priest in Peril and go to Canifis. And you have this entire sort of A to Z mapped out within 5 seconds. And indeed, those routes, you don't come to those routes if you're new to the game without a wiki. Um, because you're actually sitting there like, okay, what is a good prayer training method? That's your first search. And then you see, okay, dragon bones. How do I get dragon bones? And then you see, okay, easiest source is blue dragons if I'm don't want to go into the wildy. And like through that, like you said, the internet detective role that you're playing, you map out this entire A to Z route for yourself, which is the one small favor route, which I think is just quintessential to the game. So I agree that it definitely shouldn't make it too frictionless in that sense. But what I'm actually curious about, so uh, you talked about like the frustration with the collection log and the dragon axe not showing up as sort of not recognizing it's a meme drop. Um, and I get that from the perspective of a Mad Season show or an unguided. And maybe it's a blind spot for me because I've been playing the game for so long. So I'm curious for your take. once you were introduced to RuneScape, how did you go about interacting with things like the collection log? How were you steered towards certain content? And did you use the wiki at all in your first like week or weeks, or did you only learn to properly use the wiki later on? Or I'm very curious to hear your experience.
I'm a big wiki guy. I love doing research about stuff. Like I know a game has me hooked when I'm reading about the game when I'm not playing it. You know, when I'm like out doing something or like I don't know, going on a walk or working out and I'm just like listening or reading about the game or about whatever I'm interested in, I know I'm like super hooked by it. And I was like deep delving on the OSRS wiki like 24/7, which is a testament to how good the wiki is and how much I started loving the game. But simultaneously, there are certain, I don't know what to call them, core features that I think can just exist in the game itself. Like, I want, as a new player, I think, not even consciously, unconsciously, retrospectively, I wanted to be able to interface with more of the game through the game too. Like, I wish instead of I'm like, what is the drop rate? Okay, I gotta go look it up. Like, I wish that I could just open up the collection log and find that. Like, especially as just a reminder. If it's something I always need to remind myself of, it can probably just exist in the game as a point of information. Like a great example of this being better skill tabs. Right. This is something I want to say they specifically did this, or at least really invested in this because of people like Mad Season. Because while Mad Season is a self-imposed restriction, as is Unguided with Alien Food, it's a self-imposed restriction that unintentionally showcases a lot of issues with game design that
Oh, for sure, for sure.
yeah, so like things like having a lot of the skill tabs in the game just be really bad, unclear, and occasionally just flat out inaccurate, and then reworking those. And now, if you look at the modern ones, they are so good. They give you really good summaries of what the skill does and what you can use it for. Like things like that, to me, there's no benefit of only having those that identifiable core system on the wiki. A wiki should expand on it, give you unique out unique information that you couldn't find elsewhere, or give you like niche kind of cool shit you can do with that. Like all of that is great, but for just understanding what herblore is, or what agility is, or what hunter is, the wiki should not be the only outlet for that. You know what I mean? Like it should definitely be something that you access in the game. So to answer your question, long story short, like I barely looked. I don't think I looked at the clog for a long time when I first started playing, because it doesn't offer anything. It doesn't offer information I care about. Like if I'm already looking at drop rates on the wiki, I'm gonna already know what each individual boss drops. It's just more information told to me in a much more readily accessible manner. The clog is borderline useless unless I'm going for the clog, which I'm not really. Especially not early on. On the other hand, if they were to integrate that information into the clog, if that was already existing and I was aware that it existed, I would be using the clog all the time, right? I would always be looking at, okay, well, this boss drops this, and this is really, really rare, so maybe I'm just not going to go for that. I'm instead going to go for this. Like, I think that I wish that that's the kind of core feature that existed when I started playing the game, if that makes sense. And the same applies to skills and stuff.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I'm thinking because there's here again, there's a sort of balance to be struck where there's a lot of MMOs where you jump in and you get overloaded with information, right?
Yeah.
With hey, this is where you find this info, this is where you find this info, this is where you can check your dailies, your weeklies, your whatever. Um, and I think Tutorial Island and RuneScape is a great place where it introduces you to most of the mechanics. My girlfriend actually started playing a couple weeks ago. She's very much not a gamer, um, but she did Tutorial Island, and afterwards she went to Adventurer John and did some of his tasks, and I was not allowed to help her in any way. And so she, started to train some fishing, started to train some woodcutting, did a couple of quests, and I think in that sense, the current system does a pretty decent job of steering people where the game thinks you should go. Um, Now this is of course only for free to play. So that you mentioned things like Herblore and Hunter, and I agree. As soon as you become a member, this overload of information. You're not faced with this overload of information from a UI perspective. Like no one is throwing at you, "Hey, this is you're a member now. You can do this, 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 and this, and this, and this." That's all for you to figure out on your own, which I think A has something magical, but B it can of course be like extremely confusing. And that is the hardest balance to crack is where do you give these people like, hey, here's where I can learn more about the herblore skill or about the hunter skill very easily through a menu in game, but then start exploring and discovering things on my own without having to read the 1 to 99 herblore guide on the wiki.
Yeah, for me, it's really important that like the foundational elements are accessible in game, and the extracurricular or niche or unique or like very not even very just like more information for wiki, but information in the main game. If the main game lacks information, that's a problem with the main game. But if you want more information, the wiki's great for that. And I think like and I agree with you. I don't want flashing stuff all the time. I don't want that. In fact, like I would say I think this was my suggestion back when I made my like old school RuneScape's new player problem video, where I touch on a lot of the features that they have since improved heavily on in a new player's experience. And one of the features I highly suggested they add is a way for new players to discover that set bonuses exist, based on just Mad Season not having discovered them yet. And like
Right.
so you equip an item with a set bonus, and much like when you level up a skill and the skill blinks, your user interface element should blink, and then it shows you that, oh, you have a set bonus now. This is where you access that tab. And then now you know it exists. No new set bonuses or anything ever make that shit blink again. But like just a one-time like notification or a one-time like demonstration that this is a facet of the game that you otherwise would have never known exists, until potentially far later. And that's the kind of like slowly introducing a thing and then just having a player get reminded of that thing or remind themselves of that thing later on. That's part of the satisfaction of it, right? Like just knowing the most basic information, and then from that basic information being able to make your own choices and have your own agency. One of my biggest like criticisms of the game at that point, from a new player standpoint, is that like there's so little direction that it feels like the game has nothing to do, which is like the opposite of how the game should work or feel, right? Where like you're like, oh my god, there's so much to do. I guess I'll chop a log for 35 minutes and quit, because you don't know what to do yet, but you just know that there is stuff to do, and there's it doesn't feel like there's an onboarding for what you can do. And that's why I'm like very supportive of the game integrating features that give you the core information necessary without ever over explaining the actual depths of the information. And this is something very unique to old school and just RuneScape, because there is an actual depth there. When other MMOs go for width, and just over explain all that width, like you would see in like a retail WoW with all the pop-ups and explanations and how overwhelming it feels, for a game like old school, it really benefits from having a core section of information exposited to the player akin to a tutorial island, but maybe more, maybe integrated into the game in a more like less tutorialized way. It should feel natural the way you discover it. Like you're looking at your skills, you see that you leveled one up, it's blinking because you level it up like it does in the main game. You click on that skill that's blinking. Oh my God, there's an explanation of what the skill is. Before this, it would be a showcase of the levels of the skill and like what you can craft with that skill based on the level you are, but you don't actually know what those things are. Like you don't know what a combat potion is, but now like it feels so much more, it gives you that core information. Sorry for the yap.
Yeah, no, I mean, you make a great point. I think the point you made about, for example, the set bonuses is is an example of a really great addition that doesn't break like the pacing or the experience of the player while still adding valuable information. I think stuff like that you can definitely add. Um, like you can put that in tomorrow and the game will be better for it.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that just the one thing I want to be wary of when we're making these improvements, and I'm in favor of almost everything you're saying, if not everything. Um, is there is something absolutely magical about creating an account, coming into Lumbridge, and having no clue what to do. Because old school RuneScape is, at the end, a sandbox MMO. And the fact that you have to set your own goals, and decide for yourself what you want to do. You need to know the options, of course, which I think is where improvements could be made. But keeping that sort of magical mystery of figuring out what you want to achieve and do with this account, uh, that should not be steered too much. And again, there's going to be a balance there.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with you. I think that the options is exactly what I'm advocating for. Like, I don't want there to be like a, click this, go there kind of thing. I don't think that's healthy for the game at all, especially not for the kind of game this, old school is. But um, just being aware of your options and how to pursue them, even like just in the beginning is I think a good thing. And I think it's been shown that a lot of these like really early features that they added to the game recently have done a wonderful job of introducing new players and having those new players, stick to the game. It's a huge reason why the game is a lot more popular today than it was like 2 or 3 years ago. Is because they just made things like Scurious did such a great job. So no, definitely
Yeah, for sure.
definitely agree with you there. I mean, other than that, I know we're brushing up on 2 hours there. I want you to uh, give us a quick peek, I guess, into what the near future for GameCube Jona looks like. Like what is the next 6 months like for your channel?
The next 6 months for my channel, that is an interesting one. Well, I've been there's a couple of math videos that are in the pipeline. One of them has probably been the biggest nightmare so far, and it's not nightmare. But it's Chambers of Xeric.
Oh yeah.
Because oh my god, oh my god, the systems and the points and the way it works is such a mess that in order to make a cohesive story out of it is gonna be a challenge. But I'm trying. Then there's some other popular requests were next drop rates, for example. Those explained exactly how that works. Um, I've been working on that plugin, like I mentioned, the one that does this sort of data gathering from people doing bossing encounters, so we can perform some actual data analysis on, hey, what is the average kill time, and does that change if a player is a grandmaster uh, or has only completed the hard combat achievements while wearing the same gear, all that type of fun stuff and questions you can then answer, which I'm really excited about. I hope people will look forward to that plugin as well. And then finally, there has been there's one creator in the old school RuneScape space called Kraken, who is making his very own old school RuneScape game mode. I don't know if you've heard of it,
I haven't.
but it's called Chunk Blazer, and it's basically leagues meets one chunk accounts, which sounds like the exact right dopamine level for me. So you're randomly assigned a couple of tasks within your starting chunk, and as soon as you complete X number of those tasks, you can unlock your next chunk, and they're not bound by any extreme rule set of, oh, you need to get 99 wood cutting in the lumber starter chunk, for example. It's just, oh, chop, I don't know, 10 oak logs or chop a yew log, maybe. I'm not sure what the tasks are. The game mode hasn't released yet, but it's something I'm super excited about. And I love Kraken. Just want to shout him out. That work is fantastic. Really looking forward to that, and as soon as that releases, I will probably be making a series around that as well, because I don't think I'll have a more fun time playing RuneScape than on that account. And aside to that, Mike Penny content 50/50 series is still going to keep going. I will keep going until I'm a master of the combat achievements and can finally call myself a decent player at this game. And that's what's in the work. Not everything is going to be next 6 months, but most of this will be.
Awesome. Yeah, that game mode does sound really cool and great. I mean, that sounds like a lot of work and a lot of success. So wish you the best there. Awesome. Thank you again so much for joining us here on Fireside, and we'll hopefully have you on down the line as well.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really enjoy talking to you.